Welcome back, everyone, for another deep dive. Today, we're doing things a little differently, going beyond the typical dates and names to explore some really fascinating hidden histories. The stories that don't always make it into the textbooks.
Yeah, exactly. It's kind of like peeking behind the curtain of what we think we know about the past. We'll be looking at those overlooked events and the people who, surprisingly, really shaped our world.
So, to guide us through this deep dive, we'll be using excerpts from an academic thesis. It's titled Unveiling the Past, Exploring Hidden Histories and Their Impact on the World. Honestly, it's an incredible resource full of, amazing insights.
This thesis makes a really interesting argument that seemingly small or localized historical events, those things we might not think are super important, can actually have huge, just enormous global consequences. It also suggests that we need to take a closer look at, who we consider important historical figures, and that these hidden histories aren't just, interesting stories. They still shape our world today in all kinds of ways.
Okay, so let's break that down a bit, starting with that first idea. The impact of events we've probably never even heard of. The thesis uses the term global ripple effects, which sounds pretty intense, I gotta say.
It is, yeah. Think about it like this. You toss a tiny pebble into a pond, and it creates, ripples that spread way beyond where it landed. The thesis argues that history kind of works in a similar way.
Okay, I'm totally intrigued. What's an example of one of these, historical pebbles that's created waves we might still be feeling today?
There's one that's really fascinating. It's the Battle of Karansebes. Happened back in 1788. It was part of the Austro-Turkish War, which itself, doesn't get a lot of attention in history books.
Austro-Turkish War. Okay, got it. So what happened at this Battle of Karansebes? I'm curious.
So the Austrian army was camped out. This is in what's now modern-day Romania, and they were waiting for an attack from the Ottoman forces. Tensions were, super high. Everyone's on edge. And then, well, let's just say the Austrians ended up attacking themselves.
Wait, they attacked themselves? How is that even possible?
I know, it sounds crazy, right? But different parts of the army, they basically mistook each other for the enemy.
Yeah.
It was dark, there was confusion, lots of shouting, and before anyone could figure out what was happening, shots were fired. And, well, it just escalated into a full-blown friendly fire incident.
Wow. So a case of mistaken identity, taken to a whole new level.
Exactly, and the consequences were, disastrous.
No.
They suffered a ton of casualties, which obviously weakened their position in the war, and maybe even more importantly, this whole incident gave a huge psychological advantage to the Ottomans. Hey, these guys can't even tell who they're shooting at.
So this friendly fire debacle wasn't just a military blunder. It actually, shifted the balance of power in the entire region.
That's exactly what the thesis argues. It suggests that this, seemingly isolated, almost comical event had repercussions that really echoed through time, impacted the course of the war, and ultimately shaping the map of Europe.
That's pretty mind-blowing. Makes you wonder, what other small events might have shaped the course of history in ways we don't even realize.
Right, and that's the point the thesis is driving at. What if we're missing key turning points in history? Just because we're only looking at the big picture, what seems insignificant today could be, crucial to understanding tomorrow.
It's like we need to pay more attention to the footnotes, right?
Yeah.
Because they might actually be holding some pretty big clues about the forces that shape our world.
Precisely. And that idea really challenges us to think about, what seemingly small events happening today, right now, might be setting the stage for, major global shifts down the road.
Okay, so we need to look beyond the obvious. Now, the thesis also talks about rethinking who we consider important historical figures. What's that all about?
So it argues that lots of influential people have been left out of, mainstream history. And this often happens because they didn't fit what's called the dominant narrative, meaning the version of history told by, those in power.
So who gets to decide what stories are told? And whose contributions are, deemed important? It sounds like there's a lot of power in controlling that narrative.
Absolutely. And the thesis is saying we need to, dig deeper and bring those overlooked figures back into the spotlight.
Who's an example of one of these figures who maybe deserves more recognition? I'm curious.
One that really stood out to me was Eliza Lucas Pinckney.
Eliza Lucas Pinckney, not a name I recognize.
That's exactly the point. Pinckney was a colonial American plantation manager back in the 1700s. Her story is a really powerful example of how women, especially those working in fields like agriculture, economics, they've often been left out of the history books.
Okay, so what did she do that was so important? Why should we know her name?
She pioneered indigo cultivation in South Carolina, which totally transformed the South's economy. Back then, indigo was like a really difficult crop to grow in the colonies. But Pinckney, she experimented and figured out how to make it thrive.
Indigo, as in the blue dye. Wow, that's fascinating. So she basically turned indigo into a cash crop for the South.
Exactly. It became one of their most important exports, like even rivaling tobacco in terms of, economic importance.
That's pretty incredible. So why isn't her name more well known? You'd think someone who had such a massive impact on the, economy would be like a household name.
You would, wouldn't you?
Yeah.
And here she was, shaping the economy, writing all these letters about her discoveries with, agriculture. But for a long time, the dominant narrative of American history focused on, well, the contributions of men. Women's contributions, even those as significant as Pinckney's, were often, minimized or just completely ignored.
But it's not just about like missing information. It's about whose stories are being told and whose perspectives shape our understanding of the past.
Precisely.
Yeah.
And by reintegrating figures like Eliza Lucas Pinckney back into the, historical narrative, we can really challenge those traditional narratives and gain a much richer and more complete understanding of how our world came to be.
It's like putting together a puzzle with only half the pieces. We need all the pieces to see the full picture.
Exactly. And as we start to uncover these hidden figures and their contributions, it makes you wonder, who are the hidden figures of today? Whose contributions might only be recognized years, even decades from now?
That's a great question. And speaking of the present, how do these hidden figures and events like the Battle of Karansebes and, Eliza Lucas Pinckney, how do they continue to influence our world today? I mean, they happened so long ago.
That's the third big idea the thesis explores, and it's a fascinating one. It argues that these hidden histories don't just live in the past. They have a very real impact on our, social, political, and cultural landscapes, even today.
Okay, I am definitely hooked. Let's dive into that in our next segment.
So yeah, these hidden histories, they're more than just, interesting anecdotes. They can actually reveal a lot about, why things are the way they are today.
Okay, I see that. But how do these seemingly hidden things from, way back then actually influence us now? What's a concrete example?
Well, take policymaking, for example. The thesis argues that understanding historical context, especially those kind of hidden aspects that we often just ignore, can really help us find better solutions to, current problems.
Yeah, that seems like common sense when you say it like that, but I guess we don't always think that way. We tend to get so caught up in the here and now that we don't always consider how we got here.
Right, exactly. It's like trying to solve a puzzle without, looking at the picture on the box. You might be able to force some pieces together, but without that full context, you'll never get the complete picture.
Okay, I see what you mean. But how does this actually play out in real world policy decisions? What's an example of that?
Let's look at something like housing inequality. It's a major issue in a lot of cities today, right? To really understand this problem, to really get to the root of it, we need to understand historical practices like redlining.
Right, yeah. For those who aren't familiar, can you quickly explain what redlining is?
Okay, so redlining, it was this discriminatory practice used in the U.S. where banks and other institutions would actually, draw red lines on maps around neighborhoods that they considered risky or undesirable for investment. And guess what? These neighborhoods were often predominantly Black or minority communities.
So even though it was, outlawed decades ago, the impact of redlining, it's still being felt today.
Exactly. Redlining created a system where minority communities were systematically denied access to, loans, mortgages, other financial resources, which led to disinvestment, segregation, concentrated poverty, the effects of that, deliberate exclusion. Well, they continue to ripple through generations, even today.
Yeah, that's a powerful example of how something seemingly hidden, like a historical practice, can have a very real impact on, people's lives even now. Makes you realize how important it is to, understand those historical roots if we really want to address present-day inequalities. We can't just, pretend the past doesn't matter.
Absolutely. And this principle applies to so many, contemporary issues, from healthcare and education all the way to climate change. Understanding those hidden histories, it helps us see the bigger picture and develop more effective and equitable solutions.
So by uncovering these hidden histories, we're not just learning about the past, we're gaining valuable tools to create a better future, which is, what we all want.
Precisely. And it's not just about policy either. The thesis also points to the important role these hidden histories play in, social justice movement.
Yeah, that makes sense. Social justice is all about, fighting for equality and fairness. So recognizing the struggles of marginalized groups throughout history can probably provide a lot of like inspiration and fuel for those movements.
Exactly. When we learn about the hidden histories of, those who fought for social change in the past, it gives us a deeper understanding of the challenges, the triumphs, of these movements, what they had to go through.
It's like realizing you're not alone in the fight, right? There's this long line of people who have been working towards these goals for like generations.
Exactly. And their stories can be incredibly empowering. Take the fight for women's suffrage, for example. For decades, women organized, they protested, faced incredible opposition to gain the right to vote, you know? And learning about their strategies, their resilience, their unwavering commitment to equality, well, it can inspire us to, continue pushing for progress today.
It's like tapping into this like wellspring of collective wisdom and, courage. Knowing that others have overcome similar obstacles, it can give us the strength to like keep fighting even when things seem impossible.
It reminds us that, change is possible, but it rarely comes easy. It takes time, dedication, and a willingness to challenge the status quo, which isn't always fun.
And those are lessons we can learn not just from the, well-known historical figures, but also from those whose contributions have been like hidden or marginalized.
Precisely. And these hidden histories can also help us avoid, repeating the mistakes of the past. They can shed light on how certain policies or practices led to injustice, inequality. It's like giving us a roadmap of what not to do.
It's like having a cautionary tale,
Yeah.
right? A reminder that even well-intentioned actions can have like unintended negative consequences if we don't understand the full historical context.
Exactly. History's full of examples of that.
So it sounds like these hidden histories are incredibly valuable, not just for understanding the past, but also for navigating the present, shaping the future. But it also seems like a lot to take in. It can be overwhelming to think about all the things we might not know or understand about the past.
Yeah, I get that feeling. But I think it's important to approach this with a sense of curiosity, open-mindedness, rather than, fear or guilt.
So don't get bogged down in feeling bad about what we don't know. Instead, focus on learning and growing, which is like a lifelong process.
Exactly. And it's important to remember that we're all on a learning journey when it comes to history. There's always more to uncover, more to understand, more to learn from.
It's like we're constantly adding pieces to this like giant, ever-evolving puzzle.
And the more pieces we add, the clearer the picture becomes.
So where did these hidden histories show up in our lives? Beyond things like policy and social justice. Where else do they matter?
They're everywhere. They influence our, cultural landscape, shaping how we create and consume culture. Everything from the books we read, the movies we watch, to the music we listen to, the art we appreciate, it's all connected.
Give me an example of that. How does, knowing about a hidden history change the way we might, like, experience a piece of art?
Imagine you're looking at a painting from the 19th century, right? On the surface, it might depict a simple scene from everyday life, maybe a family having a picnic in a park.
Seems pretty straightforward. What's the hidden history here?
Now imagine you learn that the artist was a woman who was struggling to gain recognition in a very male-dominated art world. Suddenly that, seemingly simple picnic scene takes on a whole new layer of meaning.
It's like there's a hidden message or a secret code, within the artwork.
Exactly. You start to see how the artist might be subtly commenting on her own experiences, her challenges, her own unique perspective, as a woman navigating a world that didn't always value her contributions.
It's like the painting becomes a window into her life and her world, and understanding that context makes the artwork even more, powerful and meaningful.
Exactly. And that's just one example. Hidden histories can enrich our understanding of all sorts of cultural expressions, from literature and film to music, even fashion.
This makes me wonder what other, hidden influences might be shaping the culture we consume today. What stories are we missing? What aren't we seeing?
That's a great question. And it's one that the thesis encourages us to constantly ask. The more we understand these hidden histories, the more we can appreciate the richness and complexity of our cultural landscape.
It's like realizing that every piece of art, every book, every song, it's all part of a like larger conversation, one that spans generations.
That's a beautiful way to think about it. And that conversation is, constantly evolving as we uncover new stories
Yeah.
and re-examine, old assumptions.
So as we wrap up this deep dive into hidden histories, what are some key takeaways you'd like, listeners to remember?
Well, I think one of the biggest takeaways here is that history is way more complex and interconnected than we often, give it credit for.
It really is, and as you were saying earlier, it's like constantly evolving, right? As we ask new questions, uncover new perspectives, it's never really finished.
Exactly. And, the thesis really emphasizes the importance of looking beyond those traditional narratives, seeking out those hidden stories. Why is that so important? Well, it's because those hidden histories, they challenge our assumptions. They help us see the world like in a whole new light. They remind us that history isn't just about the past. It's a living, breathing force that shapes, our present, our future.
So it's not just about adding more like facts to our mental history books. It's about using those hidden histories to, gain a deeper understanding of ourselves and the world around us. It's about connecting the dots in a new way.
Exactly. And they can inspire us to create a more just and equitable future. Remember Eliza Lucas Pinckney? Her story reminds us that there have always been, individuals who challenged the status quo,
Yeah.
made a difference, even when their contributions were, overlooked,
Yeah.
minimized.
It's like they were planting seeds for a future they might not even see, which is like really powerful when you think about it.
That's a beautiful way to put it.
Yeah.
And it's a reminder that we too can, plant those seeds for a better future
Yeah.
by learning from these hidden histories, by amplifying, marginalized voices,
Yeah.
and by challenging systems of oppression. It's about taking action.
So how do we do that? How do we start like incorporating these hidden histories into our understanding of the world? Where do we even begin?
Well, it starts with curiosity. Be willing to ask questions, to, dig a little deeper, to seek out perspectives that might be different from your own. Don't just, take things at face value.
Right. Don't just accept that traditional narrative, Be a little bit of a skeptic. Question things.
Exactly. And be open to the possibility that what you thought you knew about history, well, it might not be the whole story. There might be more to it.
Now, we've talked about how these hidden histories can like inform policy decisions, inspire social justice movements. Are there other areas where they play a significant role, other ways they impact our lives?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
They can shape our personal identities, our
Yeah.
understanding of our families, our communities, even our sense of belonging in the world.
So it's not just about like big historical events. It's also about those personal stories, those family histories that have shaped our own lives, right?
Precisely. For example, learning about your family's history of migration or their experiences, during a particular historical event.
Mm.
Those things can give you a whole new perspective on your own identity, your place in the world. It's about understanding your roots.
Yeah. It's like adding, depth and richness to your own like personal story. It's about understanding where you come from and how those experiences have, shaped who you are today.
Exactly. And as we uncover these personal hidden histories, we often find connections to, larger historical narratives. It's like weaving our individual stories into this grand tapestry of human experience.
That image of a tapestry is so powerful. It reminds us that we're all, connected and that our stories, both big and small, they contribute to the richness, the complexity of that tapestry.
I love that. And it really highlights the importance of, preserving and sharing those stories, of making sure that these hidden histories are passed down, to future generations so they're not lost.
Because those stories, they have the power to, teach, to inspire, to connect us in ways we might never have imagined. And that's something worth holding on to.
Absolutely. So as we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave our listeners with this thought.
Mhm.
What hidden histories are shaping your life? What stories have you inherited? And whose voices are you, amplifying? These are questions worth pondering as you continue to, explore this fascinating world of hidden histories.
Oh, that's a great point to end on. Thank you so much for joining us on this journey of discovery. And, keep exploring those hidden histories. There's always something new to learn.